My name is John Lyons. I am a painter and a poet, and I cook. Because I include the cooking because my creative path where I am involves those three areas. When one does not work, I go to the other, and the others work, I carry on like that. And they're all part of my creative process. So that's who I am, what I do, or what I'm being, more likely. I did not become an artist in a very strange sort of way. I didn't really realize I was an artist until people started taking notice what I'd done and thought, oh, he's got talent. But in that time, I was in Trinidad, and having a talent was almost like having a hobby. But it was a passion. I don't know where it came from, and I pursued it. I only thought of being an artist really um, when I was told that I am an artist. Because I used to work in the civil service in the early years, 5 years in the civil service in Trinidad. But I used to go to the, the facility created the by the council, British council in Port of Spain, where people exhibited their work. There was a little gallery there, and also had facilities for people to come in and actually paint and use facilities there freely. So it is at that particular point when I was studying to go away to do sociology and thinking, oh, that's what I want to do. But at the same time, going after work into that facility to paint until I was then said, well, why do you go? What do you want to do with yourself? Why don't you do art? You're an artist, for heaven's sake. Why don't you become an artist, as I did? I went to Goldsmiths College. I said, oh, and that was it, really. Well, the ideas in my paintings, you know, grew up, was born in Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad particularly, where I lived my life, most of my life. It was an experience of being there in such a multicultural, a rich multicultural country where you've got the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Indians, the Chinese, and also the Africans, where there was a lot of folklore, legends, everything was there, actually. And it was visceral as far as I'm concerned. I lived it. It was part of who I was in that time, you know. I wouldn't go into all the stories about how scared I became with the stories and all the rest of it, and that was the subject matter that saved me from my depression when I was at Goldsmiths College, having to pay my way to college. And I was very, very lonely. Is going back to that culture and I came from that actually helped me to survive in the 50s, mid 50s, 59 I came. And it was that period that was very, very, very hard, very difficult. Because I was paying my way through college. I didn't have a grant or anything. Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. Because well, having gone to Goldsmiths College and my eyes were opened very, very, very widely, and I began to understand that art is not just about imitation and copying something from nature and being good at that. I suddenly realized it's a lot more than that. And as a result of that, of course, I got interested a lot in other artists, but I was looking not to copy them or to paint like them. I had that sort of innate curiosity of wanting to know why people painted the way they did, what was behind their thinking, and so on. And that is really what pushed me. So therefore, people like Chagall, who was most of his friends were poets, and people like Matisse, Kandinsky, even Picasso, you couldn't put your hand on him, he was everywhere. you were so prolific doing different styles and doing all this stuff. That gave me the courage to do really what I am being rather than what I do. And they appeal to me, you see. They appeal to something inside of me that I didn't begin to realize that I have. And that is really, so there's no one particular artist, but there are a lot of artists that I like. Francis Bacon was fascinated with Francis Bacon, but one particular point of his throwing paint and canvas and the way he did, and his intuition and the chance part of aspects of his work, his approach to his work. That fascinated me. So I liked what was behind their doing what they did, more than actually the style that they painted into. And also I began to realize that art is not just copying or representation. It has an abstract and conceptual element that fascinated me. Well, I love that painting. I remember having a little dance when I was painting it. I was hearing the music in my head, and having had the experience of what we call canboulé. Canboulé, of course, has to do with the burning of Cain. As part of it. Canboulé was can brûlé, which is part of the French, because the French did settle there after a while, and they became part of that in a very interesting way, because some of them dressed like slaves and so on, and have this the mask, the bal mask balls and so on. So that interested me. There was a very interesting link. And what really got me there was the spirit, knowing the way people suffered in Trinidad and parts of the background, the historical background of suffering, and to see people break away on Camboulé during carnival time, where there's a whole fantastic mixture of people and cultures together, having a great time. It was cathartic. And that interests me a great deal, really. And it was a great joy doing that painting. But also, it embraces cultures, it embraces everything. And the way people deal with their own problems as well, it all happens in Camboulé. And that was one of the paintings that delighted me in doing, really, and helped me a lot, going back to my past and reliving it while doing that painting. Fantastic, really. That's how Camboulé came about. Camboulé. Interesting, isn't it? Well, being an artist with links to the Northwest is amazing, really, because when I got to the Northwest, I was very interested in teaching. And I have to mention this because I suddenly realized that sharing and teaching is really the same thing for me, actually. Because the way I taught, I shared my successes and my failures while painting and the adventure of painting. With students, how I taught at every level. That's how I taught art. Anyway, and I started my teaching career in properly in the Northwest, and that's where I moved from elementary to comprehensive to being a lecturer at a college, right? And I was always painting. I never stopped painting, never stopped writing. To say, in fact, people find it strange. I carry notebooks with me everywhere I go, and I'm always scribbling in it, or drawing, or googling it wherever I am. And that all, I came alive in properly as a creative artist person in Manchester, and I had the opportunities in Manchester. I remember exhibiting at the gallery, the Peterloo Gallery. It was one of the first exhibitions I did there in that square, and I came alive. I began to realize really what I should be doing, and also using my teaching as part of my development as well, and that's how I did it. And it all happened in Manchester. I remember it was from Manchester, and I did myself an alumita, created Lingtan, created a studio called Zamana Studios, and it was while being there that I was asked to to push for the Arts Council. Shocked me. I said, "What? Me push for the Arts Council? What?" And I remember Elizabeth Johnson was thinking I was going to say no. Then she began to describe what I have to do and how important it is. And I said, "Oh, all right." So I didn't know about about doing anything like that. I didn't. And then I met, I met Sandy Nairn, who one day found me at the Corner House. Is where I exhibited. I exhibited there. I remember I was exhibiting, but Maggie Hamlin had two galleries up, spaces upstairs, and I had the bottom. So I met a lot of people there, a lot of interesting people there. So it became like a hub in a way for me because it's there. Then the BBC asked me to be on one of the panels. So many things happened to me there that time. I thought, oh, I'm staying here because a rolling stone gathers no moss, as my grandmother used to say to me. So I stayed there, and but I was more interested in the adventure of painting, the processes of working and writing. And asked to do reviews. Well, it began in Manchester. A lot of what I'm doing now actually began in Manchester, really, and that's why it's important for me, Manchester. You know, it helped me a lot.